Good evening, welcome. This represents the second effort at community outreach from an American Nuclear Society meeting. We have a small crowd here in the room. We're broadcasting from Orlando, Florida. We have several people here that will be giving presentations on a variety of topics. If you have questions during the presentation, you're more than welcome to ask them. This is how you would do so, by interfacing with the GoToMeeting software. As you type your questions there, we'll collect those here in the room, and then we'll be asking them as the evening progresses. And of course, we'll be taking questions live here from the floor. To kick us off, I'd like to welcome John Gilligan, our Executive Director from North Carolina State, representing now DOE and NEUP. John?
Thank you, Greg, and welcome everybody to our outreach session this evening. And we're pleased you could make time to do this, because we did have a lot of feedback on the process last year, and things have changed a little bit. We've improved as usual, so we're very pleased to report what's going on with regard to that. Of course, one of the main things is that pre-applications are back this year, of course, and we're in that process of doing the reviews on the pre-application. And of course, that's going to make this a much better process. So what you see now, of course, are the due dates. Pre-applications have already been submitted. Those are being reviewed right now. Infrastructure is due this week, both the reactor upgrades and the general equipment. And so we'll be working on those. NSUF preliminary SOWs are due this week. Full applications, invitations, hopefully will go out by the end of December, with full proposals due for R&D on February 12th, along with the IRPs, et cetera. Of course, all the scholarship and fellowship and the IUP program, those have all been submitted, and those are also in process right now. Just to summarize, of course, for those that are not quite familiar with the DOE NE funding for universities program, we take up to 20% of the R&D budget from NE, and that is then awarded through a peer review process. We've been doing this for 10 years, and so there are various different parts of the R&D award process and the infrastructure process, and we'll describe a little bit of that tonight. Universities are also eligible for NEET funding through the same CINR that we're talking about this evening. And then, of course, there's other investments that DOE NE makes through fuel management for the reactors, and then national lab funding as well. The importance of this funding, of course, for universities is essential for the vitality of not only the research and development effort, but also the workforce development in this country in the nuclear area. And you can see here the DOE NE missions include viability and competitiveness of the existing fleet, advanced reactor concepts, which are quite complex in many ways and being developed at the present time, but also very exciting. And then also implementing the national fuel cycle strategy as that develops, and then the supply chain associated with that, with infrastructure. So we're going to make sure your proposals, of course, are tied to one of those three main mission areas in order to be successful, as well as, of course, addressing the individual work scopes as they're stated. This is a summary of previous awards for the process with NEUP, and as it has evolved over the many years, the 10 years or so, we've awarded over $637 million in funding to 123 schools, national laboratories, industry, et cetera. And in particular last year, close to $60 million was awarded. We hope this year will be similar to that, but no promises at this point because the budget cycle is not complete and we won't know what those numbers are until the spring and the awards are made at that point. So we're very excited about this program this year because of the large number of work scopes. IRPs are back this year, so we have 3 IRP work scopes at the present, and so that's back in the mix, and they're very impactful type projects that can lead to significant results, as we well know. So we have several presentations tonight, including reporting policies and procedures. People have asked about how to make that process better, so we're going to summarize what we're doing and hopefully make sure that you understand what that is through the PICS system. We're also going to have updates on the current CINR, covering both R&D and infrastructure. Greg is going to do that. Joanne Hanners is going to cover this reporting policies and procedures. Then we're going to discuss procurement, including PI moves, no-cost extensions, travel funds, all of the issues that we tend to get questions on, and others, and Aaron Gravel will address those. And then we're also going to discuss tonight the important technical review process to make sure you understand how the reviews are done. Well, not only the technical reviews, but also the relevancy reviews and how all that's folded in together in panel reviews once we get the individual reviews to make the selections based on recommendations that we put together from the panels going to DOE. So that's really what we're going to be covering tonight. We hope it covers all of the issues that have been brought up over the last 6 months or so, or since the last round of funding, to make more clear exactly what we're doing and some of the changes that have been made based on suggestions and discussion. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joanne Hanners, who is the contracting officer at DOE-ID, who actually is the one that negotiates the awards with the individual universities and industry, et cetera. So she's a very important person. Joanne?
Thank you, John. As he said, I'm Joanne Hanners, and I'm the contracting officer over the NEUP funding opportunity. And I go over the review of the processing of the awards, as well as reporting requirements. We have Nick Case that can answer any questions you may have as well on reporting. And then we have Dave Yarwood with Allegheny Science and Technology, who takes care of the work packages. So I know you're all wondering what happens once you get that notice that you've been selected. You think, it's been a while and I've not heard anything from anyone. What's going on? Well, those applications go to the contract management division and we start going through those. Once we've gone through them, we look at the list of things that we may or may not need for that award. So as a PI, what you can help us do is you can provide us good solid applications that have good complete budget justifications, meaning that you've covered all of the items that are in your budget. You can make sure you have quotes for equipment and then also detailed travel breakdown. We understand that you may not know exactly what your airline tickets are going to cost, but in 2 years from now, but if you go to a site and you look that up and you say, you put down a figure, you're like, this is where I found it. That's great for us. That shows us that you've looked for it. After that, after we go through that, then we make a list of all the things that may be missing in the award, and we'll send that email to the PI as well as the business officer. And then you're both aware of what we need. The quicker you get that back to us, the quicker we can get your award placed. Once we are able to award that, we do list, we have all the contacts in your application, and we send it to the business contact and to the PI. So it's notified that you have an award. Now the business officer needs to go out to Fed Connect and they need to download all of the documents for that. Now when you get the notice that you've got an award, you're going to want to talk to your business officer because you want to make sure they give you all the attachments that are included in that award, because there's a lot of instructions in there that can help you out. So the federal reporting requirements checklist, I know every time I look at that, I get a little confused as well. It can be overwhelming, and every time we try to simplify that, I think it gets more complicated for everyone. So if you take the time to look through it, there is a key on the bottom of the first page and in the second page, and there's a lot of instructions. I think there's 20 pages worth of instructions that you can look at to try to understand those. And like I say, we're always open for questions if you are having problems. The quarterly, yearly, and final reporting are all essential because they tell us what you're doing. They report on your progress. And it's good to understand that the quarterly reports, as well as all of the reports, if they're delinquent, they not only show delinquent for the PI, but for the university. So in the years to come, if you have delinquent reports as the PI, that does reflect badly on the university, and that's not what you would like to have. One other important thing to remember is that the university is considered like the prime. So they're responsible for any subrecipients, subawards that they may have to make sure that they're not delinquent on their reports. Because if they're delinquent, then it shows that the university is delinquent. So you as PI, you want to make sure you're a good steward and make sure that everybody gets their reports in. And finally, if you do have questions on that form, and you can look at the DOE, it's F46,000.2, and it does provide all the directions and instructions. But like I say, we're always available to help you through that process. And we are streamlining that reporting progress. And like I say, we try to make it easier, but sometimes we don't, but we are trying. So next, I'll turn it over to Dave.
Thank you. I'm David Yarwood. I work for Allegheny Science Technology, and I support the NIA program in 3 ways. Primarily support the INL folks like Nick Case with managing the work package forms and the quarterly reporting templates and distributing them all out to the PIs. I also support the DOE headquarters personnel who review the NUP reports and progress and provide them quarterly program reviews. And most importantly, I think I support you all as the PIs with any questions you may have regarding, especially with the reporting system. Talk a little bit about PICS-NE that you may hear. The good news is that going forward, you really don't ever have to worry about PICS-NE. Nick and I handle all the reporting input for you into PICS. So what will happen is I'll send you all your work package forms and your quarterly reporting templates. You send them back to Nick and myself and everybody who's on the distribution list, and we'll handle that all for you. And if there's any comments from the reviewers on the DOE side, we'll work with you to get those addressed and support you in that way. So the first step in getting this information into PICS is your plan, which is the work package form. So that has your scope, your objectives, and your milestones. So the milestones are basically just the steps along the way you're going to take to complete the project. They could be a major milestone or just a minor milestone. Every milestone does have to have a deliverable to demonstrate that you have completed. That should be submitted along with your quarterly reports. You may have a milestone that's due, say in July, but your quarterly report is not due until October. You don't necessarily have to submit that report, that deliverable to us in July. You could just roll it up and submit it along with your quarterly report, and we'll mark it complete as it was completed on time. So, or if you complete it in July and you want to send it to us then, we'll upload and knock it out then too. If you have an FY18 or earlier award, you've already completed your work package form, so you should already know all this. But for those of you who are submitting your pre-applications or looking to FY19 awards, this is the plan that you'll be submitting. So the last part of this is the budget or the spend plan for your award. So each milestone will have a spend plan, basically where you allocate the funding that you have been granted, and you need to allocate all of the funding to these milestones. You have to allocate all of it, including that which goes to the national laboratory collaborators, if you have any. I know that that money doesn't go to the university. It kind of bypasses you and goes directly to them. But their costs, their actual costs, are rolled up and reported against your project. So they do have to be included in your spend plan. Obviously, the no budgeting for costs beyond the completion date, even though the final report's not due until 90 days after the project end date, you can't budget costs for those last 3 months. And then just as a general note, for having supported the NEA program for a couple of years now, I've noticed that costs ramp up pretty slowly, especially because these awards are generally, they start in October, and you're all trying to recruit students at in October, and well, guess what? They started in August, so they're probably already found another project. So costs tend to ramp up over the first year. And then on top of that, there's delays between subcontractors. There are delays when you submit for the amount of time it takes when your invoices are submitted to when they're accounted for in the DOE ID cost system. So just in general, there's a little bit of a lag there. So you might want to build that into your spend plans. And once the work packages are submitted, they're reviewed by the DOE, by the technical point of contact, the national technical director, the federal manager, and then the office director. And then once they're fully approved, we move into the quarterly reporting. So each quarter, I'll get an actual cost report from the DOE Idaho office, and then I'll take that and I'll churn out about 147 different quarterly reporting templates and send them all to you all. I've gone through a couple iterations now of these reporting templates, so I'm trying to make them better every time. One thing that I want to call your attention to is on the cover sheet, there is a little cheat sheet that has your subject line and all the email addresses to submit it to. So if any of that information changes, if some of the folks have moved around, Aaron has moved to headquarters, so some of the email addresses have changed, so just refer to that when you're submitting your quarterly reports. It's right there on the cover sheet, and I'll put it in the email body for you as well. So the RPPR template is an Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of tabs on it. I talked about the cover sheet, and you've got your accomplishments. That should be basically the meat of your quarterly report. And each tab has little subsections in it. So I'm not going to go through every one of them. Like Joanne said, there's about a 20-page booklet of instruction that you can look through. I'm just going to hit the highlights that are the most I feel are the most important or have the most questions. So on the very first one is the objectives, the goals, and that's basically just straight from your work package template where you put your objectives in there. It doesn't need to change. You can leave it throughout the duration of your project. If there is a change to it and you want to highlight it, then feel free to do so. But I try to make it as easy for you as possible and keep that pre-populated and not touch it. What you do need to update every quarter and pay close attention to is the next one, which is what was accomplished under these goals. So that's your quarterly report right there. And it doesn't need to be a 30 paragraph or like 30-page report. It's just what you did over the past 3 months, and then the meat of your report could be in your deliverables. When you complete your milestones, that's where you can put the real detailed technical reports with all your figures and pretty pictures and everything in there. So, and then also the what do you plan to do during the next reporting period to accomplish these goals? That's your next quarter's look ahead. So the reason that these particular fields I highlight is because we take the information from that and it goes directly into PICS-NE, and that's part of what gets submitted and reviewed the most carefully, I will say, each quarter. Your whole report does get uploaded, and depending on who your technical POC, they may download it and look over every line. But if they don't, they will at least see the accomplishments and the look aheads. And then again, the last line on here, the changes / problems, that gets put into PICS-NE as well, so they will see that. You have milestones that may be delayed. You run into a technical issue or a programmatic issue you need support with. You put that in the changes problems tab under any of the categories there, but particularly the anticipated problems or delays section. Then again, that will go straight into PICS and be highlighted for the technical POC. So any impacts you have to milestones or delays that you want to go into more detail in, that's where you can put that. So the last and scariest tab of the RPPR is the cost and schedule status. And this is where you take the milestones you have from your work package and get this pretty colors in this chart here. And it basically just shows you whether your milestones are on schedule. It gives you their budget, start and end date, your percent complete. And then the last three columns are for, okay, if the project is, or if the milestone is complete, or if it's late, or if it's expected to be late, then we have to provide a little bit more information. So as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide is a little drop-down box on the status column. So you click where it says on schedule, or if it says update needed, you click on that, you get a little drop-down box and you can select a different status. So if it says if it's late or if it's complete, you select that, and it'll actually highlight the fields that you need to complete in that row. So the reason this is important is because we get into the next section, which is the cost variance, and these percent completes and the budgets roll up into your how much cost variance you have. So whether you're on schedule spending wise or behind schedule or ahead of schedule. Again, when milestones are completed, you do have to submit a deliverable with them. You can just attach them when you send your quarterly report. We'll upload those into PICS and they'll be submitted for review. So as I was saying before about the cost variance, it's based on the milestones and the budget and spend plan that you did in your work package at the start of the project. The little block there at the top, that's from the work package form. It shows you, okay, here's what I budgeted to spend for this milestone. 16,900 was the total budget, and you see it's spread out by month. So if we're in the month of September, FY 2020, and so far we've earned $14,700 of value for that. So when you take that and compare it to the actual cost for the project, if it's above or below, if it's plus or minus 25,000 and plus or minus 10%, then a cost variance explanation is required. So again, in an effort to make it as easy as possible, if a cost variance explanation is required, the cell is highlighted in the spreadsheet. So the most important thing is to make sure that you do status your milestones first. So at the top of that spreadsheet there, you go through and you change everything from either on schedule to expected late or complete. You update your percent complete and your revise your actual finish date, provide a short narrative. And then once you're done with all that, then the spreadsheet does all the calculations, and then that'll tell you at the bottom whether your cost variance explanation is required. So it's not a lot of math or anything like that you all have to do. Just look and see whether it's yellow or not, and it will tell you whether or not it's required. And you don't have to understand all of this. You can call me anytime, and I will happily help you, walk you through whatever needs to be done. Also, every quarter, when I send out your quarterly reporting templates, I send out instructions along with that. You can refer to them, and if you have any suggestions or anything you think would make the process easier, I'm always here to help, and I'm always trying to make this process better. So last three bullets here, these reporting is essential to support the NEIP program. Joanne mentioned that it is a responsibility not just of the PI but also of the university, and also if your reporting is delinquent, it could impact your university's potential to get future awards. So before I turn things back over, I just want to reiterate that I'm always here to help. I'm eager to help you all. I'm really honored to have even a small role in the work that you all do. And I'm just glad to be able to support you in any way that I can. So don't hesitate to call or email. Keep my phone on me at all times, and I'll answer it as often as my wife lets me. So thank you very much.
David, thank you. As most of you know, I'm Greg Bland. I manage the INR Integration Office on behalf of DOE. I'd like to visit with you about some of the changes and updates we have to the CINR this year. Perhaps the largest thing for the community is we will no longer be employing a semi-blind review process. You are encouraged and able to list your accomplishments, your name, your facilities, your publications. It all must fit in the technical narrative, but we no longer will do the semi-blind. If some of you still give us a semi-blind application, you will not receive it back. We'll just send it on to the reviewers and they'll be reviewing it as submitted. So that's perhaps the biggest thing that we have this year. We have added that we would like you to give us a list of all of the publications that have resulted from previous CINR efforts. This is consistent with the NSUF, so that's where we are stemming that from. If you're an applicant for NSUF 2 this year, as we stated in the webinar, you must be an industry applicant to lead that effort. Only industry applicants are eligible to lead. You must also have your DUNS number and register with the SAM website if you're an NSUF applicant, so you want to have those forms on hand. And importantly, this has not changed, but you must affirm your ability to accept the NSUF user agreement. That is non-negotiable. Every year it feels like we have someone who is in the situation where that agreement cannot be accepted, where there's perhaps legal staff within the entity that wants to discuss it. That is a non-negotiable end user agreement and you must affirm your ability to accept it. Pre-applications for NSUF, you have a separate section where you must describe your readiness. If your samples are not ready to enter into the NSUF, your application will not be considered further for review. Your statement of work on your NSUF application will be uploaded to neup.gov, will be appended as a separate upload. PIs and collaborators, as we have had, are considered final when your application is received. If you need to make changes to that, you can do so, but you've got to interface with the integration office. We've got to get the affirmation of the contracting officer. What we're doing with that information is making sure that we are in line with the eligibility requirements and that we don't have something that results in a conflict of interest. So do know that you can make those updates, but we do require knowledge of that, and we'll get that affirmed and make sure that we don't have a conflict, and then you can be on your way. You as a PI are responsible for the selection of the appropriate work scope. We have in the past moved applications to work scopes that are more appropriate at the request of program managers. We interface with the PIs before those moves are made. If you believe you have subscribed to the wrong work scope, it would require that you contact us. We'll socialize those circumstances with the contracting officer, and if it's allowed, we'll happily update and move your application. You may only compete your application in a single work scope area. You may have multiple applications per the eligibility requirements, but you can only submit one application. That application can only be represented in a single work scope. For our reviews, we manage our conflict of interest to the institutional level, if at all possible. When needed, we do go to the individual level. It's one of the reasons we ask who your collaborators are on your application, and we need to know if you make some updates to your collaboration list. You're responsible for not exceeding your submission limits. At the full application, which is the step that's left, you can have no more full applications than you would be eligible to hold as an investigator. All of the materials required by the FOA must be submitted by the published deadlines. If they're not, your application will not be considered. You may not provide funding to any international institutions. It is not allowed per the rules of the FOA. So if you have international collaborators, they must have funding from a separate source other than requested funds through your application. University-led applications, except for those that are programmatically driven out of Appendix B, you may have no more than 20% of your requested budget going in composite to collaborators other than domestic universities. If you have pre-award costs, an example of pre-award costs could be students. You can have up to 3 months, 90 days, immediately preceding the award of pre-award costs. Recipients must obtain prior approval from the contracting officer, and if something should go astray in the negotiation for your award, you are responsible for those dollars. They are non-recoverable from DOE. Importantly, every year we have applicants who lock the cells in their financial spreadsheets. Do not lock the cells in your spreadsheets. DOE procurement needs to have the ability to manipulate those numbers to conduct the negotiations that are required to make your award. Our pre-application process is now in review. We anticipate having the invitations out in December. With the exception of NSUF, your pre-applications that are not invited may be submitted as a full application. If you are competing for NSUF access or for research co-joined with NSUF access and you are not invited, you may not submit. The reason for this is there's a large amount of work and expense that is incurred in feasibility awards or feasibility reviews to make awards. So if you are uninvited through the NSUF, you may not submit. If you are an uninvited applicant on the NEUP sponsored portion of the FOA, you must have an average score of at least high relevance to get a technical review, and that must be accompanied by an average score of moderate program priority. So what I just told you is that if you submit an uninvited application, it will be re-reviewed for relevancy and program priority. We have minimum standards before you can move on to get a full technical review. If by chance you have work that you would like to compete, but it's not fit in the confines of the work scopes that we currently have, there is a mechanism whereby you can submit an unsolicited proposal to DOE. That's defined on this slide. So there are some guidelines for that. You must demonstrate a unique and innovative concept or unique capability. You have to offer a concept or service that is not otherwise available to the federal government, and it cannot resemble the substance of a recent, current, or pending application. So the link where you send those applications is listed here. Once you submit those applications, they're no longer under our purview, so do know that there is a separate and defined process for that. Contact information. We are constantly available by phone, web, and email. The TPOCs and federal program managers for the individual scope areas that you can converse with are listed on our website at neup.gov. If you have questions concerning procurement, you can contact Brandon Steik at DOE. If you have questions on the general form or substance of your application, feel free to call our offices. You can find us at 526-1602. You'll get Drew Thomas. Or you can find me anytime at 526-8178, or submit your question to neup@inl.gov. I have a few updates for the reactor and general scientific upgrade infrastructure FOA. Brandon Heidrich is with us. He can answer questions if needed for both of the areas, university reactor upgrade support and general scientific upgrade support. We've got just a few things that are new. In both areas, you may submit only a single application as an institution. If you are competing for a reactor upgrade award, you must have a research reactor that is fueled by DOE. To apply to any area of the FOA, you're required to be either a current partner of NSUF or have the ability to demonstrate a willingness to join NSUF if so invited. So do know this is not something you're signing up to, and as you go through the application, do know that those applications that have a strong and direct tie to support NSUF with unique capabilities are advantaged in the system. The review criteria for both reactor upgrades and general scientific infrastructure have changed from last year. Last year's criteria are in the FOA. This year's criteria again listed, but do know that the weight and the scoring criteria themselves have both changed. These represent the changes for reactor upgrades. The change for general scientific infrastructure are listed here. If you have any questions on that, you can find appropriate contact at either NSUF or with our office, and I'll be giving those contacts to you in just a minute. Do know that there are exclusions to the GSI and reactor upgrades. Applications requesting high-performing computing equipment are not entertained. If you have any questions about that, there are 2 websites where you can go to learn either how to access HPC resources. Those are nsref.inl.gov or hpcweb.inl.gov. That'll give you information on how to access those resources, but they are not topics that we're calling for. So do know that if you have an application and you're requesting those resources, it will not be successful. These are your contacts for the infrastructure. Jonathan Kirkham or Brandon Heidrich at nsref@inl.gov. Infrastructure in the FOA Q&A is on their website. We do host a courtesy copy at nup.gov. If you have procurement questions on this FOA, that's Trevor Bluth at DOEID. His contact information is here. And this year you will be making application through nup.gov. So that concludes the updates that we have had for the CINR this year. I'd like to introduce Aaron Gravel, who is our lead program manager out of headquarters. He'll take us through a few of the policy updates and reminders, and these are very important topics. So, Aaron?
Thanks, Greg. I want to clarify on one of the slides that Greg had, one of the bullet points. He said that PI and collaborators are final when applications are submitted, and under extenuating circumstances, there may be opportunity to change. Not with the PI, only with the collaborators, and we'll talk about that here as we go through a couple of these slides. Two years ago, and let me just note that I'll be covering the PI move request policy. And as we know, everybody, from time to time, there's movement, right? There's change in employment and a desire to do something new or something different, or a university that's calling your name and you're feeling the urge to go, and yet you have an award with the CINR FOA. What are we going to do? And that's what I'll be covering. A couple of years ago, and even before that, it seemed like the process, we've always had the policy, but it seemed like the process to get through those PI change requests and try to make the appropriate arrangements were extremely messy. And yet we had the same policy. And I think it was because we just weren't all communicating on the same information. We weren't all on the same page, depending on which office you called or which contracting officer you were talking to, or contract specialist, or what have you. But what we've tried to do, even with this meeting last year, is try to explain the policy a little better and to make sure that we're all on the same page with what the policy is. And last year, our processes in the procurement office, thanks to Joanne and her team, it was much easier and cleaner. And I think it was a little bit better than previous years. And as we continue to communicate the process, I think it'll continue to be better and easier for everybody to understand. The CINR is a competitive funding opportunity announcement, and it does abide by financial assistance regulation. We have the DOE Guide to Financial Assistance, and we also have regulations that are outlined in 2 CFR 200, and DOE has supplemental information in Section 910, 2 CFR 910. Those are our regulations that we follow. And with those regulations, they tell us a few different things about funding opportunity announcements. We make awards to universities, to entities, and not to PIs. So our applicants are the universities in this case. Universities, as the awardees, hold responsibility for the execution and completion of the work that's proposed. And an award transfer from one institution to another is not allowable. So how do we handle that? We have a pre-award environment. I'll just go through a couple of these slides pretty quick. Our pre-award environment, everybody's very familiar with that. Up to the time that you submit your pre-applications for our, it would be our Appendix A and Appendix B awards that we have pre-applications in the CINR. You can make all the changes you want because we haven't received it yet. But once we receive your application, even in the pre-award or the pre-application phase of the process, then we're locked into our PIs at that point. The policy applies in post-award environment as follows. Anytime we want to change a PI specified in the award documents, if we're adding or deleting co-PIs, here any change in a key person requires the approval of the final approval of a contracting officer. If you're a PI and you have to be disengaged from the project for more than 3 months, or if you've only placed yourself in the work maybe for a month. I've seen that on several applications where there's it's being handled in a variety of different ways, where there's several co-PIs that are participating. If there's 25% reduction in time devoted to the project by the approved PI, then we have to look at changing the PI. And then also transfer of any part of the research or programmatic effort to another institution or sub-awarding. And we'll go into that a little bit in a little bit more detail here. So here's our options that we have when a PI is exiting their university, and I call your university or your home university University A, and you're moving to University B. Option 1, University A requests approval from DOE to assign a new PI at University A. In other words, the university has decided to keep the work there themselves and has determined that there's a PI there at the university that can handle the work, that can do the work that's with the university. So now the new lead PI takes over the R&D project, and if for some reason there's a PI that's recommended by the university and the PI is not accepted, then a University A, or the home university of the award, does have the ability to submit for another, maybe another PI that they have in mind that could possibly do the work. Option 2 is University A requests approval from DOE to assign a new PI at University A, assign the existing PI from University A, the original PI, moving to University B as a co-PI, and then University B is added to the award as a sub-awardee to the prime award. That seems to be the most popular option, and that's typically what we've been doing with these moves. And you'll get a note or a letter if it's you're in this situation where you need to move, that will kind of outline what the options are, and then also depending on what option is selected by the university, some details as to what is needed by the procurement office in order for the process to flow smoothly. Option 3 is cancel the award. Universities have the option of doing that in financial assistance if it's pre-award, or terminate the award if it's already something that's in place in the post-award environment. Another alternate option, I've seen it work a couple of different times. I've also seen it fail a couple of times, but we have PIs that have moved that have selected adjunct professor or faculty positions at their existing university and moving to University B or to their new institution. And depending upon what the rules are at your existing university, and we'll make the determination as to what you're able to do and how you're able to function in your award. So I just caution everybody, if you're going to try that option, make sure you really understand what your university rules are in that status before you select that option. One particular award that I'm thinking of right off, there was that option was selected, it didn't work, and it took us additional 6 months into that work cycle or that project period to get them moved over to option 2. And that was a lot of lost time. There was a no-cost extension that was awarded with that case, but still, that's 6 months of lost time, and we want to try to avoid that. Again, just really be careful as you're moving through the process, and just work very closely with program and with procurement staff at DOE, and we can help guide you through the processes. Here, this is just to recap a little of information. Again, we're looking for, a lot of times when we have PI requests, we're trying to move from one institution to another. The PI is actually sending us a note. That's great, and that's informative, and that's important for us to know, but remember, we make the awards to the institution, and the institution is who we're looking to receive the letter from. So as we receive those letters from the university, then that tells us that it's that the university is making the request, as opposed to the PI. And again, the contracting specialist, contracting officer, and a technical project officer are the ones that review these and make sure that we're following all the rules that we need to follow in order for it to be done correctly. With subawards, there's no action there. With subawards, universities that hold the prime awards must submit a new budget for their newly added subawardees and a new master budget for the awardee as well. And then if a co-PI leaves a sub-award institution, the prime award holders typically have the sub-awardee remain in place, asking the sub-award to select a new co-PI. If there's a particular set of skills that you need in your exiting co-PI, then there is also the option, and you can work with your procurement contracting officer or contract specialist, and they can walk you through the process. But you can actually change your sub-awardees and co-PIs a lot easier than you can change a PI. And in summary, the main thing is the policy is available for you to view at the NEAP.gov website, and these slides will also be available there for you to look at. If you have any questions at any time regarding PI change policy, feel free to call myself. You can call Joanne Hanners or Brandon Steik, and or anybody that's on Greg's team as well. We can all point you to the NEAP.gov, and then also get you in communication with the right people that can help you through this process if this ends up being you one day. So with that, I will turn the time over to Greg, and Greg is going to talk about no-cost time extensions.
Aaron, thank you. So we do have a rigorous policy for no-cost time extensions. DOE has a great drive to have these awards completed on time so that they can be folded into the R&D portfolio with the programs. If you are requesting a no-cost extension, you have to request that by April 15th of the year that your project will close out. If you don't get that request made by April 15th, your next window doesn't open until October 1st. You'll notice that you'll be required to land pre-applications generally within that window. That's so we can appropriately adjudicate the eligibility requirements that have been established by DOE. You can have only one no-cost extension request for up to 12 months pending review and approval, and no more than one no-cost extension will be granted. So do know that those rules are codified by DOE. You will be held to them. So the work that you have, you're strongly encouraged to finish that on time. If you do need more time, you can't have up to 1 year, but no more than that. A PI with a no-cost extension beyond December 31st of the current year is ineligible from competing for a new award. So these numbers are wrong. It should be December 31st, 2018 for the FY 2019 CINR cycle. If you have a request for a no-cost extension, send that request to both Brandon Steik at ID, and also send that to Nick Case of the NUP Integration Office. They'll help you get that request logged with DOE and work you through the process. And again, the policy is intended to integrate the work that DOE has with the remainder of their research portfolio, and they're looking to see that work completed so they can get that not only integrated, but to also help them define work scope as they understand what has been completed and perhaps what needs to be done. And there are also, I'd like to point out, 2 requests for information opportunities that are constantly open at NEUP.gov if you'd like to provide us with ideas for work scopes, or if you have ideas or needs for equipment. So do know that those opportunities are there as well. What DOE has found is that late submissions, late completion of work tends to disconnect that work from the program work. If you look at the work scopes that are in the current FOA and past FOAs, those are strongly aligned with the work scopes that are happening in the national laboratory and other federal complex. So they're looking to drive that work to completion so that they can move on. No cost extension requests and the justification for the requests are of very high interest to upper DOE in e-management, and that's typically where those decisions are made and how they are reviewed. If we look historically at the number of requests that we've had, you can see we've had 50 to 60, even as high as 70% of projects requesting no-cost extensions. You can see the definitive impact of eligibility and policy on the duration of those no-cost extensions, where you see in 2014 and 2015 those zeros as a highly desirable point in time for DOE. So do know that the work is being closely monitored. You have the option to put that work into PICS. You should understand as that is progressing, as issues are coming up, if you need some help with those. And then if at the end of that you still need more time, we do have this policy for no cost extension. With that, I'd like to turn some time to Drew Thomas, who will take you through some of our review policies, some of the paradigms. He'll talk to you about how reviewers are selected, how the quality assurance is done on those reviews, and give you a little bit of perspective in that regard. Drew?
Thanks, Greg. So this is a new section for these outreach meetings, and what we want to do is talk about 3 main things. The first is what the review process actually requires. So to give you a full view, not just of the reviews that you see, but the full set of reviews that happen in any given year. The second thing is what we do to actually catch anomalies as they come up. So this comes up especially as people read through reviews, can't put different reviews together. We try to give as much feedback as we can directly from the reviewers. And so naturally people have different opinions, and there's some anomalies there. What we try to do is catch anything that could potentially harm the application and looks like an anomaly from a numerical standpoint, and address those as we go through the review process. And the third thing is the concept of reviewer evaluation. So what do we do after the process to review the reviewers? And so we do a process where we take a look at reviews that happened in the past and reviews that have happened for the current cycle, compare those and make sure that if there are continuing issues with specific reviewers, that we address those. And so we'll walk through what I'm going to be talking about tonight is primarily based in the independent peer review section of the FOA, which is the large majority of the FOA. So there are 2 different types of review paradigms that we use. One is what we call peer review. The other is panel review. They're both peer reviews, but they're conducted differently. And so any R&D pre-applications, R&D full applications are done by independent peer review. And what that means is we have a number of reviews, as all of you know from getting review requests from me, a smaller number of reviews to evaluate, and then we combine all of those technical reviews against the pool, and then we have federal program managers that actually evaluate the technical and the relevancy review results and hold a federal panel. A panel review for integrated research projects and infrastructure is more of a traditional type panel that you can think of people actually getting in the room. Everybody's read through every single application. There's robust discussion, both internal to DOE, external peer reviewers, that happens there. Usually takes a day or 2 days. And so what we're going to be talking about tonight is category number 1, where the technical peer reviewer is truly independent, doesn't interact with the other reviewers, and are blind from other reviewers that are reviewing that same application. So what I wanted to talk about first was how many reviews does your application actually get? And so this is a question we often address when I'm making a request to somebody to take a pre-application review is, you've submitted 3 pre-applications. Do you have an understanding of what that takes to review? And so this isn't necessarily to try to be combative with anybody, but if you think of an average PI who submits 3 pre-applications, 1 full application through the process, if you combine all the reviews that happen there, those applications get a total of 18 individual reviews over the course of the year. And so some of those, typically 4 to 5 reviews, are independent technical reviews by your peers. 2 relevancy reviewers, review those a minimum of 2 times each. And then our integration office also reviews those from a procurement standpoint 2 separate times as well. And so, not that I would ever expect anybody to do 18 reviews in a year, because that's something that is not probably possible. But I did want everybody to understand that each application is treated with care and really does have a large number of looks before those final comments come to you. So I want to take you through some numbers. These are the total number of submissions between 2009 and 2018. Now, it's kind of grayed out a little bit here, but the dark blue on the left are the pre-application submissions, the green are the full application submissions, and the gray are what's actually awarded. The point I want to make here is to show scale of, we see somewhere between 40 to 60 awards at the end of the cycle, but we start somewhere between 600 to 800 pre-applications to start that process. So the review load, as you can see here, is large. And so green here are the actual number of applications, that's pre-applications and full applications combined. And then the blue behind it is the actual number of reviews. Now that combines relevancy reviews and technical reviews. But to give you an idea, on a normal pre-application year, like FY 2017, for example, where we do pre-applications and then full application where there's a down select, we coordinate and you all do a total of around 1,600 individual independent technical reviews on pre-applications and full applications during that time period. And so, you often see somewhere between 3 and 5, but realize you also have typically in a given year somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 colleagues who are also providing that same type of input into the process. So I wanted to talk a little bit about conflicts of interest, because we do get a lot of questions about when you do select reviews, why didn't you select this person? They are the expert in this category. Okay, so we talk about, it's not that anybody knows who the reviewers are, but there's always questions about, okay, there's this group of people who would just be amazing to review this proposal. And, I can't say who reviews and who proposes, but 99% of the time, the people that you would identify are people that are also proposing or collaborating in that area. And so I wanted to give an example of what our conflict of interest policy is, but some actual numbers of what Greg and I and our staff deal with on a daily basis when we're making these assignments. So you can get an idea of what the scope is in a specific area. So you can think, like advanced methods for manufacturing, any work scope that you can pull out. I'll give a couple of examples here. But as Greg said, the conflict of interest is managed on the institutional level, meaning we first try to eliminate everybody from every institution that's either leading or collaborating. If that's not possible, for example, the example that I'm going to talk about today, there are 60 individual institutions competing in that work scope area. Not possible to have 0 reviewers from those 60 institutions and be able to have a full review list. And so what we do at that point is go to what we call individual conflict of interest. And what that means is we make the assumption that for the most part, a faculty is an island and that they're working on separate problems than other faculty members are. And so with that assumption in mind, we use the individual conflict of interest to say, okay, if this faculty member is not competing in this area, and there is another faculty member at the institution who is, then we can use faculty member A in circumstances where those applications do not involve their own institution. And so that's the methodology, and we use that in regards to other national laboratory collaborators, as long as they don't have any departmental or managerial responsibilities over the individuals that we'll be reviewing, or they don't direct strategy at the national laboratory in any way. So they're typically mid-level national laboratory employees that do some of these reviews as well. So those are the ways that we manage the conflicts, and we also rely on individuals to declare conflicts of interest. So we'll be asking, do you have a publishing relationship? Do you have a past advising student relationship? Things that we're not going to directly know just based off of the application. So to give you an example of this is one work scope. It's one of the more heavily conflicted work scopes in this pre-application phase. 38 applications, 25 lead institutions. Once you include all the collaborating institutions, there's 66 institutions total and 141 different individuals competing in the area. And so, when you think about some of these areas, once you get 141 of the experts all stuck in the same category, there's obvious challenges to being able to put together those review lists. And so when we do ask for reviews, sometimes you are potentially the best qualified person to be able to do that review. And so just remember that as we go, that what we're trying to do is manage these conflicts appropriately, and of course choose qualified people to review the proposals. And so we do rely on some individuals to do quite a few reviews for that reason. So if we find somebody who is an expert in the area, who is not conflicted, sometimes you'll notice you have 5 or 6 or 7 pre-application reviews and 3 to 4 to 5 full application reviews, and you're like, oh, the load is humongous. Well, it may be one of these situations where we have 140 other individuals competing, and it just happens to be that you have the expertise, you have the availability because you're not conflicted. So what we do, so I want to shift gears now into the in-process review evaluations. And so what we do during the process is we go through several steps as technical reviews come in. And some of these things are applicable to relevancy reviews as well. So it's not just the technical reviews, but what we're trying to do is to identify anomalies in the scoring as the scoring comes in and before final evaluations and recommendations are sent to DOE, NE. And so what we do in our office is we take all reviews and we compare the peer reviews and the relevancy reviews for any anomalies. So you can think if somebody's scoring or has evaluated something super high and there's 2 that have evaluated it super low, we request those three reviews so that we can get essentially a majority opinion from a peer review standpoint on which opinion is probably more accurate. And so at that point, we identify all those anomalies, we mark them on our review sheets, and during the final evaluation and reviews by the federal and lab personnel, all of those anomalies are identified, they're pointed out, and each of them are individually addressed in those review meetings. So we actually spend, from sun up to sundown for about a full week, going through with every federal program manager any of these anomalies and having these discussions about what should be recommended for invitation, what shouldn't, and finally, what the recommendations based on the review should be for recommendations for funding. And so there are 2 things that we do as we go. All anomalies and especially low scoring reviews, like if there's a 0 or something super low, they're reviewed by the federal program manager and the technical, typically the NTD from the lab, to evaluate whether the comments are valid. And so a lot of times that's the first step. And if the review is found to not be valid, as unwarranted, as an outlier, then the review team can do really one of 2 things. They can discard the review and it can find an alternate reviewer, meaning that we get an alternate opinion for that 3rd review, or it's disregarded and we let the 2 reviews remain. In a situation where the other 2 reviews are very consistent, then we disregard the anomaly and we allow those other 2 peer reviews to stand and we move on. And so, so quickly I want to talk about comments. All the comments that you see are reviewed by INR, Integration Office staff for grammar and appropriateness. Greg and I often say we always take out the F word, which is funding. So it's never appropriate for a federal program manager or a peer reviewer to say that something's recommended for funding in those comments. So those are always taken out. The comments are intended to provide feedback to improve the review, your future proposals. And so that's a key point. They act as a debrief to tell you about what was good and what was bad about the proposal in the eyes of the peer reviewers and the federal program managers. But they are intended to be forward-looking rather than backward-looking. And so that's something I'd like to encourage people to think about. There is a misconception that a critical comment means that you got a bad evaluation. And that's something that I constantly talk to people about. The comment may seem really critical and may seem really bad, but I think if people would be surprised by the fact that some people have a lot of critical feedback, and that doesn't necessarily reflect in the evaluation. The evaluation could be very, very consistent to the other comments that were provided. It could be higher in some instances, but what we've asked people to do is to provide actionable feedback for you to improve your proposal. And so, naturally, I think, as most of you, have taught classes for years and years, that tends to be critical in nature. And so I want you to remember, the feedback that you get from your students when you write, you tear up a paper or something like that is very similar to the feedback that a lot of reviewers are giving you as peers. And so the other thing is there's no opportunity to receive further feedback or comments from the relevancy reviewers or from the individual peer reviewers. The peer reviewers are blind for a reason. That's standard practice. And the idea behind the relevancy reviews is that as you go forward, you can talk to the new program managers that come up to clarify those work scopes in the future. So last of all, I want to talk about reviewer evaluation. So this is the concept of reviewing the reviewers. And so what we've done is we have set up a review pool that meets a set of minimum qualifications. For reviewers from academic institutions, they've obtained the level of assistant professor or higher. from a reviewer from a national lab or industry, a minimum of 10 years of experience in their respective field at an academic, national laboratory, or industry institution after obtaining an advanced degree. So that means that there are potentially individuals that have master's degrees and individuals that have PhDs. All reviewers that were approved through our original process, which was a review board at DOE from 2009 to 2016, are grandfathered as eligible reviewers. And any reviewers that are not meeting these criteria can be approved on a case-by-case basis based on the work scope area, or there are some emerging areas with limited reviewers. So I'll give you an example, like cybersecurity, for example, is an area where it's a non-traditional area, and so there are other folks that can potentially be brought in, potentially younger folks that don't have the minimum of 10 years experience. That's an example. So what we have implemented since 2016 is a statistical model to detect systemic review inconsistencies with individual technical reviewers over time. So the data is used from 2013 to 2018, and the data is actually renewed each year to re-benchmark the statistical model. But the idea is we're going to use full application reviews, which are consistent from 2013 to 2018 in form and function. And then an index is built for each reviewer based on the average variance of their review score as compared to the peers reviewing the same application. And so each one of those scores is taken. It's called a variance score. Now we average those together, and that creates a reviewer variance score as opposed to the peers that reviewed that application. So submitted and disregarded reviews. So if there was a review that was an anomaly, like I talked about before, those are all included in the index so that we can understand, essentially all of the reviews that person submitted. Standard distribution is then used to identify the consistent outliers based on that average review index score, and those reviewers are recused from further review responsibilities. And so this is our current model that was just established after the 2018 review cycle. And you'll see the lines here break at 2 standard deviations. And so what we're saying is we're going to take, essentially 95th percentile of all of the reviews, and anybody that sits outside of that 95th percentile, after a certain number of reviews, is going to be recused from further review. So of course, somebody gives one review. A lot of these little outliers that you see here are potentially somebody who has one review, meaning they have one data point to be able to push those out. And so the idea is if you have multiple reviews and you're still sitting outside of this 95th percentile, then you're not going to be asked to do further reviews. And that way we bring all the reviews more into a normal distribution, something where we're going to get hopefully less discussions of these anomalies that I talked about before. And so and I do want to point out the discussions that we make with those anomalies, it's not like we have so many that it takes forever to talk about. It's that we're trying to reduce that number down to something that's less and less each year as we finalize the model. So and it's growing each year, so we'll rebalance, meaning that model may shift, those deviations may shift a little bit, and what we're looking for before we open up for questions and everything, what we're looking for is both reviewers that are too easy and too hard. So in our evaluation, somebody who gives a perfect technical score every time it can be seen as a poor reviewer, somebody who gives a 0 most of the time. What we want are accurate evaluations, and so you'll see both sides of the standard deviation are going to be excluded from future review invitations. So those are all the slides I have. I believe, Greg, if you want to take over, I believe that may be the end of the presentation.
Okay, so I'd like to thank everybody who came here this evening. You probably gave up some quality time here in Orlando, Florida. Those who joined us on the net would like to open up the floor for questions. You've seen a lot of information this evening. All of the information that we've presented has been recorded. We'll have this out on the internet so that you can watch it at a later time for reference. You can point peers, colleagues at it. If there's copies of some of this information that you'd like, go ahead and give us a call. They will be there, the slides as well as the verbal. So if we have any questions, we have a lot of people here who can answer those questions. It's a great time to ask them if you have them. I'd like to start to see if we have any questions here in the room. I'm unclear if we've got anything on the internet, but do you have anything in the room before we move on? Yes, sir.
Can you use the microphone?
Yeah.
That way we can record the questions, so.
So if somebody from, it's not working.
She's going to turn it on for you here.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for your patience.
Sure. So if CoPI from the lead university moves to another university, can sub-award be created to, I mean, if he has specific experience on something that's needed for the project, can sub-award be given to him?
So this is specifically a question for the co-PI that moves, and since Aaron's shaking his head, I'll affirm that yes, and then further clarification from Aaron.
Yeah, a prime awardee can have a new sub-award with a moving co-PI. And they would work with their university, obviously, to make those arrangements. But saying that, the PI on the award would need to work with the procurement office at DOE, because there would need to be a new master budget. There would be some changes that would need to be made in the actual award document that include budgets, budget justifications, and other documents that may be needed. So there would need to be that communication with DOE. So yes.
I have another question.
Absolutely.
So I'm not sure if it's appropriate to ask it here, but in the current solicitation, so I heard that some rumor that the third IRP about drying will be removed. Is that correct?
I hear a lot of rumors every year. I can tell you that I have nothing from DOE that would indicate that.
Okay.
So if anyone has anything bad, but I have no news on that front at all.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions here in the room? Julie, do I have anything on the internet as far as questions are concerned?
At this time, there are no questions from the internet, so if
Okay.
anybody online would like to submit a question, please type it into the GoToWebinar application and we'll be glad to answer or read it for you in the room. Thank you.
Okay.
I had an inquiry about the review process, a continuing question regarding that. Of course, the scores of all of the applicants in each of the work scopes is put together, rank ordered, and so there's the number of proposals, say, well, we started with 35, but there may be, say, 10 full applications in one of the work scopes, and they'll be clearly ranked top to bottom. Those are the recommendations that go to the selection officer to make the final selection. I can't think of a time where that's been reversed or anything changed in terms of funding the top ranked in each of the work scopes, other than if DOE perhaps for one reason or the other determines that that work has already been done, or somebody else is doing the work and that was missed in the panel. I mean, it's possible that could happen, but that's the only kind of situation that I know. There's no geographic rebalancing or no thing like that going on, that even though it's possible, it's written in the FOA that it is possible those considerations might take place. The other thing, though, that might happen is that money might go away in one work scope, depending upon what the budget says or had thought that they might have at the beginning of the year. And so there might not be any awards, even though there might be a high-ranked proposal in a particular work scope. So it's always possible the money just goes away in that work scope, even though it's good work, but it becomes less of a priority for DOE. So that's always possible. It's also possible that more money could be added to a work scope, and so there may be more than one or two funded in any particular work scope. And those things are not known until the till we sit down in the spring with the panels after the full applications are reviewed and ranked. So there are some things like that that happen, but the recommendations that come from the panels with the ranking, there's not a bunch of mixing around of things when that goes to the selection officer.
John, thank you. John did allude to scoring that's involved with the applications. We only use numbers to rank applications, and the numbers that we currently use don't equate to anything that you could think of in terms of quality of the application, which is why we don't give you any numerical feedback. So do know that although there are numbers associated with that, they're disconnected from any statement of quality. So John did mention numbers, just wanted to be clear on that.
Yeah, and you can't compare work scopes either, because some work scopes may have a bunch of high scored proposals and the next one might be low, but it's very important. So there's no automatic funding score where if you get above 90, you're automatically going to get funded. There's nothing like that either. So we could have a bunch in the 90s and nothing gets funded, or we could have a number of proposals that might be in the 80s and more money could be available there, and they're judged as good proposals and they could get funded. So, but we don't jump over, we don't re-rack it once those recommendations go to the selection official.
Do I have further questions here in the room? I know we don't have anything on the internet. Julie has let me know that. I'd like to thank John, Joanne, Aaron, Dave, and Drew for participating this evening. As always, our staff is readily available. Phone, internet, whatever you'd like to do, you can catch up with us at opportunities such as this. We do have other avenues where we take feedback. We constantly take feedback from NEDHO. We get feedback from our surveys. We get feedback from other stakeholders. So any way that you'd like to get us feedback, do know that that's considered. It is acted on. That's why we no longer have a semi-blind process. It was one of the areas that came up in one of our NEDHO meetings. So that's no longer in there. So we do try and improve as we go. With that, I'd like to draw the evening to a close. Thank those who came. Thank those who attended on the internet. And again, if you have any questions anytime, just do let us know. Thank you.